Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Dylan Kemna with OptiCall. Today's presentation is part 2 of our webinar series on how to convert more calls to patients. This one's about building an effective phone plan. Last month, our presentation was about the importance of consistency, and today we're going to talk about the components of building that plan. A couple of housekeeping items. During the presentation, you can submit your questions there on the panel. We're going to budget some time here at the end to address those questions, but you can submit them as the presentation is going on. We're also going to try to get this presentation completed in about 30 minutes, so keep it short and sweet. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce OptiCall's president, Bill Mercier. Bill, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Dylan. And thank you for the introduction. I appreciate everybody getting on the phone with us today. And as Dylan had mentioned, we're putting on a series here of different webinars that, things that we've learned over the course of the years. We've been around now for about 14 years and taking patient calls and making patient phone calls. And just a little bit of a background on the company so you know who we are. For those of you who have not been on one of our phone calls before, we are the leading provider of elective medical phone services. We make and take a lot of phone calls. We've been around now for about 14 years. Our focus is really maximizing the customer experience to convert more of those calls into patients as they're coming into your practice. To date, we've handled over 2 million phone calls and have boosted our clients' revenue 15 to 20% above the industry average. And that's really because we're there to catch the calls, we're there to catch them when they come in and try to create an experience that is different than the other practices that are answering calls. So a couple of things that we want to go over today is we want to talk a little bit about some of the facts about today's callers and why they're a little bit different than patients that might have been calling in just even a few years ago. We're going to go over some of the challenges that face our practices today, some of the things that you guys are coming up with on a daily basis, and talk about what to do to overcome some of those. We'll talk about why a phone plan is so important for the success of your business. And we're going to review some phone calls just like we did last time. We'll review a couple of phone calls relative to some of the things that we're talking about today and have a little discussion at the end as to what can be done to improve the whole process. So to get this started, we'd like to, again, learn a little bit more about the practice that we have on the phone, and we do that in the way of polls. So I'm going to let Dylan launch a poll right now. And go ahead,
Yep.
Dylan.
So we've got this first poll up here, and just want to get some feedback from our audience. How do you guys feel about your practice's ability to convert new callers to consultations? So we'll just leave this up for, 10, 15 seconds. We appreciate your feedback here so you can see where you stand among your peers. And we're at about 60%. Leave this up. Okay. I'll go ahead and close this out. Share the results. I don't think you can see this, Bill, so
no, I can see it. I actually have it running on a different screen.
That's
right.
It's
interesting. If we look at 100% of the people who have responded, 33% are very confident. So you think you're doing a really good job on the phone, and that's great. I mean, you need to have that confidence level if you're going to do a good job. But if we take a look at the bulk of the people that have responded, 67% are, we had 8% at confident, but most of that 67%, the remaining, are average or below average. And so with the bulk of them actually falling into the average category, and that's what we don't want to be, as we represent ourselves to potential patients as they're calling in, is average. We want to be above average. We want to do a much, much better job than the competition out there, because if we do, we know those patients will come to us rather than go to the competition. We're going to run one more quick poll here. And I'll let Dylan launch that one.
Okay, this one's, if you have an idea on what your conversion percentage is, so we broke it down into the 5 different categories here. If you think you're above 75%, or if you fall somewhere between 75 and 51, I'm sure you guys can see the rest there. Or if you're not sure, we'd love to get your feedback. And in regards to what you were saying about being average, Bill, it's imperative when we're talking about elective medical procedures that it's so important that somebody has a great experience from that first point of contact.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they have other choices. All right. So we've got about 50% of the audience in here. We'll go ahead and close this up. Just a few more coming in. All right.
Okay, so it looks like on these poll results, we've got about 33% feel like they're converting 75% or more of the calls that are coming into a consult. The bulk of the people on the call feel like somewhere around 51% to 75% of the calls that are coming in are being converted over to a consult. And then it's we've got some that are not sure, but we've got a good amount that fall into that 26 to 50%. And so understanding why that is an important factor, and that's something that, you know, at the end of this webinar that we're giving here, if you ever want to sit down on a phone call and discuss these patients that are calling in or discuss your conversions and conversion techniques, we're more than happy to do that. So let's go over a quick review. And some of the things that we talked about on the last phone call is how patients are so significantly different today when they're calling in than they were just a few years ago. And that whole concept of consumerism and the patient experience, the companies and businesses and services that are out there are changing the way that they do business. And what's happened is that whole concept of consumerism, when you think about what Uber's done to the whole transportation business, Amazon to shopping, Zappos again to shopping, Airbnb to, you know, staying someplace, and Dollar Shave Club, you know, all these different things, they're delivering products and services to us so different than we've been used to and accustomed to in the past. Now, the challenge is that whole concept is now making its way into healthcare, and it's had a major effect on how patients inquire. One of the other things that we talked about last time is that when we take a look at our marketing budgets, 94% of our marketing budgets are spent on persuading that customer to make the phone call, and only 6% of our marketing budgets are spent on answering that phone call. And that creates a lot of challenges as it relates to the telephones. So here's a couple of fun facts for you. 45% of consumers last year initiated a purchase over the phone. Of those callers, 70% were placed on hold at one point or another during the phone call. And I'm sure you could all relate to this. If you're calling for something that you're interested in, want to get some more information, perhaps the person picks up and they're too busy to take the call, put you on hold, or perhaps they don't have all the information they need and put you on hold to gather more information. So 70% of us were put on hold. The average hold time is 57 seconds. And in any given day, we spend about 15 minutes of our day on hold, which is a long time relative to how much time we spend on the phone. So here's a couple of things that we see in a medical practice on any given day. First thing is a new patient calls in, potential patient looking for pricing information on a procedure, and is immediately greeted with, "Thank you for calling Dr. XYZ. Can you hold, please?" And we can all relate to this because, you know, many practices have the people that are at the front desk answering the phones, checking patients in, checking patients out, multitasking, and they can only handle one thing at a time. Another scenario that happens every day is a new patient calls in looking for information, the process, all the things that relate to that particular procedure, but never actually invite that caller in. Caller gets off the phone and now can call another practice and go someplace else. So instead of being invited in for the consultation, they are just simply let off the phone. Last scenario, and last but not least certainly, is a caller is looking for an appointment at a specific date and time for next week. There's nothing available in the calendar, so they get off the phone stating that they'll call back. Do they call back? Chances are no. They probably have called someplace else that they can find an appointment that now fits their timeline. So these are just some of the problems that we face today on the phones. And in building a phone plan, it will help combat some of the issues that we're challenging. One of the other things that I want to get over before we really get into the phone plan itself is the concept of the educational spectrum. Now, this one says LASIK. I know we have plastic surgery, aesthetics, and other specialties that are on the line with us. This really falls into play regardless of the procedure that you're looking at. It's a similar process and thought process for all elective procedures. So if we look down at the bottom, I'm going to focus in on different sections here. If we look at the bottom of this, 60 to 80% of the people that are potential patients or candidates for a procedure really aren't investigating right now. They might have thought about it. They put it on the shelf. This is really not in their mind as something that they're seriously considering. The other, call it 20 to 40%, come into the upper bracket, where you've got different sections. You've got 15 to 40% are fitting into an investigator's bracket. So, perhaps they're tired of their situation. They consider what life is like. If it's you're talking about vision correction without glasses or contacts, if it's liposuction, what it'd be like to be trimmer, whatever it is, this is the thought process that they go through. They do some heavy-duty fact-finding. They go on the internet. They're looking around at what can I learn about this? What are the the issues, if any, if I'm considering this, that I need to be comfortable with in moving forward. What they do is they become comfortable with that the procedure is safe, and they start to look around for pricing information. Now, they go through this process of now making a phone call. They've made the decision to have it, not necessarily who from, but they've decided that they're going to have it. They pick up the phone or they go to the internet. They start to make some inquiries. Now, whoever gets them on the phone and does a great job is going to get them into the office. I can tell you, this is the make or break time right at that point. Because if they make the phone call and they are not pleased with the results of the phone call, they will call the next place. So when they come in, the consultation proves that they're a candidate, they decide that they're going to have it, and money exchanges hands. So it's really important to understand when you're looking at this, this educational spectrum, that people will call throughout the entire process. You will get people that call in the investigator category. They're not ready to make an appointment right now. You can't think that every single call that's coming in is going to schedule the appointment. They aren't. Some people are just looking for some basic information, still in that investigator stage. Until they cross that line into the now buyer stage, that's when they're looking to make the appointments. So I thought it was important to make that distinction before we move on. Most of the phone calls that are coming into the practices today are going to fall into one of two types of categories. They're either calling because they're looking to book an appointment, or the biggest question that they're going to ask is how much does it cost? And these are things that we want to take a look at in creating the phone plan, in kind of guiding the patient, learning more about them to determine where is their mindset at right now, so that we know where to take them, as far as booking a consultation and how to educate them on the phone. So here's something that we came up with quite some time ago within OptiCall for our team to understand, how do you take a call? What is the proper structure of a phone call? And I'm going to talk about the anatomy, and then we're going to listen to a couple of phone calls, and then we'll actually go through the anatomy of a phone call relative to the calls that we listen to. So calls break down into different sections. We call it the concept of logical progression. And so the first section of a phone call really is the introduction. Now, this is the point that is probably the most critical for the entire phone call. You've got about 30 seconds to make an impression here, and that impression can be great or it can be horrible. And if it's not a good impression, this person is not going to book, and they're going to go someplace else. So it's important that as we're talking about the introduction, there are certain things that can be done during this to build a bit more rapport, to have a better connection with the actual caller. Second section that we've created in our concept of logical progression is the exploration, that exploratory phase. So we know who we've got on the phone through the introduction, and we'll talk again a little bit more about that as we get into the nitty-gritty detail after we listen to the phone calls. But the exploration, now that we know who we have on the phone, is learning more about that caller's needs. What is it that they called in for? What is it that they're interested in? Why is it that they're interested in that? Have they looked into it in the past? There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do in the exploratory phase. And the reason why we want to explore is we want to educate. Now, when I say educate, I'm not talking about educate everything about that particular technology that this person has a question on. Because what ends up happening if we start to get into the educational phase and we feel like we need to tell them everything we know about that procedure, then we can introduce objections. We're not the doctors. We want to educate them on what their next step is and why they should take that and why they've made the right decision calling you. That's what education is all about, not educating on this technology versus that technology and why this is going to be better than that and all that good stuff. And the final phase of this is really the closing. There's going to be one of two things. We're going to book an appointment, or they're not going to accept an appointment right now, so we can offer some information. So we're going to run one more quick poll here, and then we're going to review a couple of phone calls. So Dylan, I'll let you launch that.
Okay. So this last poll here is about how often your practice does an evaluation on your staff's performance on the phone calls, either through recorded calls internally or a mystery shop evaluation. Just leave this up for a little bit here. All right, got about 70% of the audience feedback here. I'll go ahead and close this out. All right.
All right, good deals. So it looks like, go ahead, Dylan.
And I was just thinking, Bill, we do have some people that are just calling in, so we might want to just read off these percentages. So monthly, we've got 42%, quarterly 17%, annually 0%, never 17%, and 25% not sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pleased that we're seeing monthly at 42%, because if you don't know what's happening in your call centers, you don't know what's happening in your call centers. It's that simple. And it's amazing when we review phone calls, real patient phone calls, mystery shops, whatever they may be, some of the things that we hear on these phone calls really let us know that there is additional training that can help our team members or practices team members do a better job on the phones. So with that said, I have two phone calls that I'd like to queue up here. I'm going to put my phone on speaker, and I'm hoping that this is going to come in loud enough so that we can all hear it.
Real quick, before we play those calls, can I just do a quick screen share on our mystery shop to show them? I'm trying to. Here we go. I just wanted to show everybody what our mystery shop looks like at OptiCall, and that's one of the offers here on today's webinar. If you fill out the survey, we'll place 5 recorded calls to your practice. And it's not to stump your counselors, it's really just to get a barometer on what's happening when somebody calls in. So we'll place the calls over a 2-week period on different procedures and just give you an idea of how well your staff is converting. So we encourage you to take that offer, especially for those of you that feel like your practice is converting at 75% or higher. We find a lot of times when we do these mystery shops that the calls that we place are not tracked internally. So without a system in place, it's hard to say what your conversions would be. I
was going to say one of the mystery shops that we did recently, they were hoping to have really good results, and out of 5 phone calls we placed, we weren't able to reach anybody on any of them. All 5 are transferred into voicemail, so that happens too. All right,
and those typically are factored into that conversions.
These calls that we're going to listen to are real patient phone calls. They're not mystery shops. They have been stripped out to be HIPAA compliant, so all patient pertinent, PHI has been taken out of these phone calls. They are the entire phone call, so they are a couple of minutes. I'm going to encourage you to turn your volume up a little bit just in case it's not loud enough. Because we're going to talk about these right when we finish with them. All right, so hang on one second. Let's see if we can hear them.
This is Shelley. Hi, I am calling about LASIK eye surgery, and I was just wondering what your price is per eye. Eye LASIK you're calling about? Yeah. Or you're calling about the custom LASIK with the blades? To be honest, I don't know. This is the first I've ever check into it.
Okay.
I just want to be
The
able
eye
to see.
LASIK. What was that?
I just want to be able to see.
You just want to be able to see?
Yeah.
Okay, the eye LASIK is done with a laser,
Okay.
and the custom LASIK is done with the blade.
Okay.
Right, ready?
Okay. What is the price difference, I guess?
Well, the eye LASIK, 2 eyes is $4,500, and I think $90 for tax.
Okay.
And the custom LASIK is $3,366.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
Oh, all right.
Bye-bye.
Did you want to anything else?
Okay, Dylan, could you hear that one okay?
Yeah, I could hear it pretty well.
Okay, good. I'm hoping everybody else could. So, relative to excuse me, relative to what we talked about earlier with the logical progression of the phone call, there was no progression on this phone call. And it's one of the reasons why when we talk to practices that, if you're going to have multiple people answer the phone calls, they need to have a structure of how that phone call would flow. And with that logical progression, you can write that on a piece of paper that people fill out so that they know what to go through if you're not doing it electronically. But somehow, some way, get them focused in on that, because that's where control is kept on the phone. What you can hear on this particular phone call is that the person has some pricing questions, and we didn't hear anything about who are you, how'd you hear about us, and tell me a little bit about you. There was no connection made on that caller at all. Real patient phone call that got off the phone very, very quickly. And in my opinion, for a couple of reasons. Well, the biggest reason is not necessarily price. The biggest reason is confidence. And I ask you on the phone, everybody that's listening, do you think the staff member sounded confident in her answers? And the answer to that is no. So, okay, let me start one more here.
Good morning. Thank you for choosing Rice Centers. Crystal speaking. How can I help you out?
Hi, I was interested in getting laser surgery, LASIK, either custom or LASIK. Does the doctor perform both?
We only do premium. He does do custom LASIK here. We do have the machine and the technology for it, but we don't use it anymore. We use premium, which is an upgrade.
Oh, it's an upgrade? It's not custom LASIK. It's not wave, what do you call it, wave something?
We use Wavelight Allegretto.
I see. Okay, I heard good things about that doctor. I know he's experienced.
Would you like to come in for a complimentary
I would.
consultation?
I would. I'm interested in. How much do you guys charge? Are you comparable to other places? Are you competitive?
No, we're not. We have our set prices. We don't match other centers.
No. I'm not talking about matching. I understand that. So you're looking at around what, $2,000 an eye or more?
Per eye, depending on how you heard of us, because we have some marketing advertising out there that you, depending on how you heard of us, but it starts at $29.50 per eye.
Oh, it starts at $29.50. Yeah. No, that's a bit too much for me. I'm sure you have your clientele, but thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, good. Was that one okay?
Didn't really
hear
feel
that
like,
one as well?
Didn't hear it as well, but you could hear it. It just doesn't feel like she really cares if somebody schedules or not. It seems like that happens a lot.
And it's a premium practice. When you're talking about almost $3,000 per eye, that's a premium practice, which you would expect a premium experience. And so, why isn't this happening? Well, it's not happening because the staff aren't prepared with some sort of a plan. And that's exactly what that concept of logical progression does. Now, the very first step before you can get into the idea of logical progression is to smile. And I know we've heard this a million times, and it sounds so incredibly cliche that you need to smile on the phone, but it makes a difference. And the reason why it makes a difference is it's not just something that we're saying. What ends up happening when you smile is there's a physiological change, not just psychological change that happens where your voice changes, and it actually sounds more enthusiastic when you have a smile on your face and a better tone. And that's really the biggest reason why we say there has to be a smile on the face. And I don't know if in either one of these circumstances we heard that that person had a smile on their face, and I know certainly not in the second one was that on there. So let's go over the introduction, talk about the introduction, what happens. What we do in our introduction phase is we want to do a couple of things. We want to find out, has the person ever called before? This way we know, are we talking to somebody that we have to let them know more about the practice? Or if they're already a patient of ours, they already know what great doctor they're coming to, and we don't have to get into that level of detail. Most cases, there are patients that have not been into the doctor already. So in that case, what we want to do is we want to find out who we have on the phone. And, you know, we've told our staff, we don't want you to go into demographic collection mode. And I've heard practices do this, where they go and they ask, well, can I have your first and last name and a telephone number and your address and your email address? And they go into instant demographic collection phase. And that's not what you want to do. All we want to know right now is who do we have on the phone. Do you mind if I ask your first name? First name is Dylan. Great, Dylan. Now, are you a patient of ours already? Have you ever been in before? No, I haven't. Oh, excellent. Well, how'd you hear about us? And so there's a couple of things that you can do during the introductory phase that start the concept of a conversation. And what we hear all too often is that instead of making these phone calls an experience, they become a transaction. And that's what we want to get away from. When you're going into instant demographic collection phase, it sounds like you're on your own agenda and it becomes transactional rather than an experience. And so the idea is to start to build the concept of a rapport, and also now you have some information for tracking. You have a first name, you have a marketing source, and it is okay in the introductory phase to say, just in case we get disconnected, is there a good number I can reach you back on? So you have another touch point just in case that happens. Now we know with today's technology, calls don't drop as often as they used to, but it's an excuse to get a phone number in the introductory phase. So that's what we're looking for. Now another important piece of the introduction is that everybody has a consistent greeting that is consistent across the board, across to all employees. And I can tell you that with all the practices that are out there that I've visited or I've talked to, that isn't the case. So you may want to call your center at different times and find out, is everybody greeting the patient the same way? If they're not, come up with a uniform greeting so that everybody sounds the same when they're calling through and you're getting a consistent greeting. The exploration phase, this is where we're learning more about that caller. If it's some sort of a plastic procedure, aesthetics procedure, how long have you been considering this? Have you looked into any other options? Really starting to ask some questions to learn more about them. If it's in the vision correction, are you having problems with your reading or your distance or both? Are you in glasses or contacts? It's coming up with the questions that suit your whatever business you're in to learn more. And what it does, again, is builds rapport. It makes it feel like you are interested in the caller, and you can create conversations based on what it is that they're asking. Remember, we're trying to make this an experience, not a transaction. The way to do that is to really make it so that it's more conversational rather than just, I'm filling in the blanks in something I need to fill out. So, but what you learn in the exploration phase is going to guide you for that education phase. Now, we didn't hear any of this on the 2 phone calls that we listened to. We didn't hear an introduction that asked the name of a caller, so both of those calls were let off the phone, and I promise you neither one of them went into any tracking system if those practices were tracking. We didn't hear any element of, well, tell me about yourself. Are you in glasses right now, or do you wear contacts? What do you have problems with at the moment? Have you ever been into a doctor's office before to find out whether this is something that you can have done? All of the questions that guide the caller. What that does is it sets up this next phase, which is education. Well, let me tell you what I would suggest is your first step. And that's a big thing that you can do. What I just said, let me tell you what I would suggest as your first step. You're making a suggestion. we do offer a consultation at the office. It's an opportunity for you to come in, meet with our doctor. You'll be with us for about an hour and a half. You'll also get to meet with our patient coordinator. We're going to go over all of the questions and, regarding the procedure they're interested in, whether vision correction, aesthetics classes, whatever it is, and let them know what that visit is all about. And so we're educating them on the next step, not all of the technologies that they could possibly come in for and why this one's better than that one and all that good stuff. Education is really trying to close them in on an appointment. Now, we all know throughout this process in the education, the biggest question that's going to come up is the 800-pound gorilla, how much does it cost? Why do people ask this question on a phone call? They ask it because they have no way to differentiate Dr. A from Dr. B. They're going on the internet. They might have gotten a referral from a friend. They may have heard a radio ad, whatever it is, but they still don't know how to determine whether one doctor is better than another doctor. And so what they do is they ask price. It's the only thing that they know how to ask. Now, price is only an objection in the absence of value. If you're not giving them enough reason to justify your cost, then they may get off the phone. So here are some ideas around that whole concept of making price irrelevant or less relevant, and really trying to make it take the focus off of it. So first thing is creating some sort of uniform scripting that answers the questions clearly. Never avoid the cost. We've had practices come to us that we take calls for, and they say, we don't want you to give the cost of the procedure. And we do our very best to try to convince that practice to allow us to give the cost and to justify why it costs that much, because you called the right place, because of our doctor, because of his experience, because of the technology, because of all of the reasons why we're different than the other practices that you're calling. So you don't want to avoid costs. You want to make sure that there is no absence of value, that they understand the value behind what it is that you're charging for. Let the caller know what's included. So don't just give the cost out. If there are post-op visits that are included, whatever else is included, know that it's a full package. And offer payment options as a method of affordability. One of the things that we've experimented with was steering the caller away from the price question. And it was by asking, is that about what you were expecting? That opens up a yes or no. Well, no, it's a little more than I thought it was going to be. And if they say that, well, it gives you an opportunity to sell the value more, to really give them the reasoning behind why you do cost more and that you're worth it. So a little bit more on this is the focusing on affordability through the use of the payment options. Talk about 0% interest. These are things that can really relate to people. I know anytime that I'm looking to buy a new car or a big purchase, I'm more focused on how much is it going to cost me each month. Not how much is it overall costing, how much does it cost every month, and does it fit my budget? And one of the things that is very, very effective when getting price presentation too is compare the monthly payments to something the caller can relate to. So if you're talking about vision correction, contact lenses, if you go to Starbucks every day, you're spending $4 a day on coffee, $20 a week, and how much that costs relative to the procedure that they're looking at. So relating it to something that the caller can relate to is very, very effective. So, and one of the biggest things that I can say here is that it's the concept of selling the appointment, not the procedure on the phone. That's the one thing we've got to remember when we pick up on these phone calls, is that it's not about selling that procedure to them. It's about selling them on why they need to come in for that consultation. And that will absolutely have an increase on your conversions from the call to consult. And the final phase of this is really closing. So at the conclusion of the call, or towards the middle to end of the call, after you've educated them, you're going to invite them in. When you invite them in, it's a yes-no. It's not a maybe. It's a yes or no. They're either going to book or they're not going to book. So in booking, that's obvious. You've got a closing there and a conversion. If they don't book, they're going to fall into one of two categories. Either you can offer them some information and they will accept that, and then you have a lead to follow up on. Or they're not going to accept the information. Maybe if we go back to that idea of the educational spectrum, and we have the investigators, they're still in that investigator's category. They have not made this decision to actually have the procedure. They're still trying to learn more about it and whether they can afford it. And you need to understand that people will fall into both of those categories. And the biggest problem with practices and tracking is the ones that accept information are tracked. The ones that do not accept information in the investigator stage, we don't even know because they don't hit any of the tracking systems that practices are using today. It's important to track that category too. So if you are electronically tracking, absolutely you do want to use something like that.
Can I add something quickly to that, Bill, on the closing?
Sure can. Yep.
I know we're running out of time, but a lot of times we hear the callers on the mystery shops mention the consultation, but they're afraid to ask that question. And I don't know if it's a lack of training or if they don't feel like they're in a sales role, but it's really important to invite them in and form it as a question, not just mention the consultation. It's almost like they lack the confidence to do so.
Exactly. And what ends up happening is if you do invite them, the majority of them will come in. So just making that simple invitation in whichever way that you're comfortable. You know, some people like the whole concept of a suggestive sell, which is, well, I've got some, open appointments on Wednesday. If you'd like, I can put you in for one of those. And that works for some people. For me, I'm more comfortable and confident that if I have somebody on the phone and I've talked to them, I can say to them, would you like me to take a look at my calendar and see what I have for appointments? Because I know I've done a good enough job on the phone call up until that point that they're going to say yes or no. And if they were going to book, they're going to say yes. And it's having that confidence level to ask that question. But that question definitely needs to be asked. And again, it basically comes down to one of two goals. It's going to book an appointment, or if you're not going to book that appointment, there is a lead that could potentially be followed up on. And there are so many good technologies out there today that we don't want to fumble on the 1 yard line either. Create a follow-up plan between all of the different patient tracking programs that are out there that you could build marketing campaigns into and tasks and follow-ups and all those things. You can convert a lot of these people who have been just kind of kicking the tires all along into your patient if you just stay in touch with them. And there will be a point where they are ready to make that decision and move forward. So creating a follow-up plan is absolutely critical in the process. So at this point, we can open up some questions that you might have. And we are at about 38 minutes. We said we keep it to about a half an hour. So we're not too far off, but we are willing to stay on the phone for any questions that anybody may have.
So we've had, one was more about a comment just about one of the calls that we listened to, and she has a good point that the caller had a mixed message saying they didn't compete on pricing, but then said that they have marketing promotions. So I appreciate the feedback.
That's a really interesting point. And, the funny thing is you can never script a real call, and you never know what's going to come out. And that's just an example of something that came out from someone who actually has a good deal of experience on the phones, but was just kind of thrown off maybe by, not having the best day or by the questions that the caller had come in.
So we've got a question about, do we have scripting available that the practices can use for training?
We have a lot of webinars, different materials that we've put out in the past that I think would be available. Dylan, I'll let you do a little bit more follow-up on that one if you like.
Yeah, we do have we have a SlideShare account. It's www.slideshare.net/OptiCall that has some scripting on there. But I can connect with you directly on some of the resources that we have available. Some others are asking about the recording. So we did record today's phone call. We'll be posting it on our website under the webinars page. Bill's got the graphics for our next webinar that's coming up. So the next one's going to be about connecting with the caller and having that customer service mindset. We hope you'll be able to join us for that. One last question about the scripting: is it universal? So I would say, I'll go ahead and answer that. I'd say the process is universal. It's the same progression that Bill went through as far as introduction, exploration, education, and closing. it's just going to be custom to your practice and how you choose to answer questions like pricing. But the key is to create that consistency so everybody at the practice is singing from the same sheet of music.
All right.
One more question. I know. Do you think a web-based script is better or a printable script?
Well,
if
web-based is something that you're going to be tracking the patient in, web-based is absolutely better. Our system that we've built for our team is web-based, and it's interactive. So, one question prompts another question for them to ask the patient or learn more about or whatever it may be, or gives the answer. So the program that we built for our own internal team is very interactive, and it is all web-based. But not everybody has the ability to do that or the technology to do that. So having a simple lead form that follows a logical progression on the side of their computer and telephone is the next step and effective as well.
I'll just add one thing to that is on our web-based system, it requires that we assign a status to every call that we take, where typically at the practice level, if somebody calls, asks about price, gets off the phone without sharing a name or a number, those calls aren't typically tracked at the practice. So you're going to get more transparent data if you do have a web-based system. All right. Well, I think that's about it. We appreciate everyone's time today. Hope you're able to join us for our next webinar, and please fill out the survey. Hope you take advantage of the mystery shop offer, and we'll look for you next time. Great job, Bill.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.